Reality presents an infinite stream of data, but our biological hardware, our eyes, our brains, can only process a microscopic fraction of that data at any given millisecond. We are constantly filtering the universe just to navigate it. The ancient parable of the blind men and the elephant serves as a rigorous model of these epistemic limits. One touches the trunk and perceives a snake. Another touches the leg and perceives a pillar. It illustrates that human observation is, by default, a low-resolution rendering of a high-resolution reality. Thousands of years ago, thinkers in the Jain tradition addressed this exact perceptual bottleneck. To solve it, they constructed an advanced non-binary logic system, a framework built entirely around processing infinite complexity without defaulting to false certainties. First, it's metaphysics, how Jain scholars structure reality itself. And second, it's epistemology, the strict mechanics of how a human mind can actually know that reality. Strip away the theological layers, and Jainism operates as an uncompromising, systematic logic engine designed to map a universe that refuses to be simplified. We can trace the trajectory of this philosophical engine directly into the physical architecture of the communities that run on it. In the early 20th century, the sociologist Max Weber published studies on how specific religious frameworks act as catalysts for economic capitalism. He analyzed Protestantism, Catholicism, Judaism, and Hinduism, looking for the link between ideology and material output. But he largely bypassed a critical data point in India. The Jain community accounts for roughly 0.5% of India's population. They maintain the lowest demographic growth rate in the country, yet they consistently record the highest literacy rates, exceeding 95%, and hold an outsized dominance in India's economic sectors. This economic concentration stems from a specific cultural software. By training individuals to see every situation from infinite relative angles, the philosophy produces a class of highly literate entrepreneurs who excel at processing the complex variables of trade and risk mitigation. To understand how such a small population thrives at this scale, we have to decode the specific algorithms they use to define existence. In ancient philosophy, a core debate raged over a simple question: what actually exists? For centuries, thinkers split into two opposed camps. One camp, led by thinkers like Parmenides in the West and Shankara in India, argued that true reality must be eternal. If something degrades, it is an illusion. Only the permanent elements of the universe are real. The opposing camp, like Heraclitus and Buddhist scholars, argued that every physical object is constantly decaying. To them, only the momentary, constant state of change is real. Permanence is the illusion. Jain philosophers rejected this binary. They argued a physical object, like a pen, consists of both. The core atomic structure cannot be destroyed, but its outer shape degrades. Reality, or sat, is the synthesis of three things: utpad, creation; vaya, destruction; and dravya, permanence. They divided the properties of every object into two strict categories. Dravya refers to permanent attributes. Paryaya refers to its transient, shifting modes. Reality, under this model, demands the acceptance of contradictions. True existence is the simultaneous paradox of constant physical degradation anchored tightly to indestructible foundations. Defining the internal structure of an object is only the first step. The system becomes complex when we look at how that object interacts with its environment, a concept known as radical holism. Every object possesses svaparyaya, internal characteristics belonging strictly to the object itself, but it also has parparyaya, external properties. A pen is defined by not being a phone or a wall. Its identity is shaped entirely by its relationship to everything else in existence. If an object is defined by its relationship to its environment, the epistemological conclusion is absolute. To know one object perfectly, you must know its relationship to every other object in the universe. The formal term for this is Anekantavada, the doctrine that reality is multifaceted and that every single entity possesses infinite attributes. True isolation is a cognitive illusion. To exist in this framework means being irrevocably tethered to the infinite cascading data of the entire universe. If Anekantavada states that reality consists of infinite attributes, we face an engineering problem. How does a biological, finite human brain process an infinite data stream without crashing? Jain scholars mapped the micromechanics of human observation to answer this. They called practical perception Vyavaharika Pratyaksha, breaking it down into 4 strict sequential stages. Stage 1 is avagraha, or indeterminate perception. The brain registers that something is in the room, but hasn't yet identified what it is. Most data is discarded right there. But if the brain decides it matters, it moves to stage 2, iha. This is the active mental effort to categorize that shape. Next is avaya, the determinate classification, the brain concluding the shape is a coiled rope. Finally, dharana occurs, where that processed data is retained into memory for future use. Human perception is a severe filtration system, discarding the vast majority of data to ensure survival. This biological filtration has consequences for how we communicate. If perception is limited by our hardware, our language and truth claims must reflect that limitation. This leads to the rule of Sayadvada, or epistemic relativity. It revolves around the prefix sayat. In Jain logic, it functions as a rigorous qualifier, meaning relative to this specific perspective. Under this system, an absolute definitive linguistic claim about reality is mathematically and logically invalid. A finite observer cannot make an absolute claim about an infinite object. It is easy to confuse this with Western philosophical skepticism, like the doctrines of Greek philosopher Pyrrho, but there's a sharp mechanical difference. Skeptics like Pyrrho, or later David Hume, doubted the existence of an objective reality. Jainism, conversely, fully accepts objective reality. It simply demands we admit that multiple, contradictory observations of that reality can be simultaneously true when properly contextualized. Certainty without context is a philosophical error. True objectivity requires the rigor of admitting the subjective, physical limits of the observer. We are left with a final metaphysical paradox. If the universe is complex but operates without a central creator god or prime architect, how does it self-organize? The Jain model proposes that the physical universe runs on autonomous atomic matter, known as pudgala. These atoms connect and compound via natural, inherent attraction, requiring no divine intervention to build the physical world. The mechanism that navigates this physical structure is the jiva, or the soul. The philosophy asserts the concept of ananta chatasthaya. Every single soul inherently contains infinite knowledge, infinite power, and infinite bliss. These attributes are not granted by a higher power. They are the default state of consciousness, currently obscured by a physical body. This creates the paradox of Jain transtheism. The philosophy explicitly denies the existence of a top-down creator god who manages the universe, yet it assigns the omnipotent attributes of a god to every living soul. In this framework, divinity is not a foundational entity that built the world. It is a latent, bottom-up potential trapped inside every living being, waiting to be unlocked. This brings us to the goal of the system, moksha, or liberation. Moksha represents the total, permanent removal of the perceptual bottlenecks restricting the jiva. When those filters are stripped away, consciousness achieves kevala jnana, or absolute knowledge. This is the ultimate epistemic state, where the soul directly comprehends all infinite attributes of the universe simultaneously, bypassing the biological brain. The figures venerated in Jainism, known as the Tirthankaras, are not gods in the traditional sense. They are individuals who achieved this absolute epistemic state, mapping the algorithm for others to follow. Their definition of a complex reality, their rules for human language, and their ascetic spiritual practices all resolve into one unified pursuit of absolute truth. Examining this structure reveals a sophisticated framework. It proves that to decode the variables of the universe, one must first conquer the physical limits of their own mind.